Hello my good friends, this is Chaos Angel here, also known as Lord Omni, and I'm back at it again with another flipping chaos discussion for you guys. And we are finally here. I am finally able to give my actual thoughts and impressions of the actual Endwalker job action trailer and various other tidbits that we learned when it came to the live letter. Yes, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and get into this shit, shall we? To start things off, they pretty much start off the live letter with the actual title screen reveal, which I will unfortunately not be getting into it too much as I was not able to actually see it fully, and to be perfectly honest, I am most likely not going to be taking a look at it at all until I see it in real life and essentially saving myself for that beautiful moment on live and going from there. Continuing things off, they go on to confirm the fact that the media tour is actually not supposed to be starting within September and is actually going to be held within mid-October, meaning that many of the things that we were essentially expecting, which would be the YouTube creators pretty much deep diving within the Final Fantasy XIV Endwalker's job actions changes and pretty much system changes, in order to give us a good idea of exactly how many of the jobs' inner workings are going to work. To add on to this, they actually went into it a little bit more, talking about their primary focus of this expansion, wherein they are essentially going to be building upon the 5.0 adjustments, wherein many other individuals apparently were talking about wanting adjustments to be reflective of 3.0 adjustments, which I honestly didn't really understand. Many other people, I'm fairly sure, most likely do not want to revisit 3.0 in terms of their mechanics. I'm just gonna point out right now, I don't know where that came from. But other than that, another focus that they were actually going about doing in terms of adjustments is making most of the primary abilities to align with 60 and 120 second timers, which I'm gonna say right now is a godsend in of its own right. Many of the freaking abilities that have so many variations of their timers just conflicts with many of the rotations that the jobs would have, i.e., like for instance the fact of Dragoons like blood charge or something of that nature. I said blood charge, but really I actually mean lance charge and blood for blood. This would essentially line up with the dragon sight in many ways, and I very much appreciate that. However, I will have to say that RIP to ley lines, as it is still technically going to be 90 seconds, and I can understand as to why and where they did that, considering the fact that with ley lines being something that is going to essentially make Black Mage a little bit OP with their movement with in between the lines, having it be a 60-second cooldown would kind of make it seem a bit overkill, just to be real. But besides all of that, we can now go ahead and get into the actual jobs and their individual changes in the long run. But before we can entirely get into those, we still need to actually talk about the roles in essence. First off, all of the damage as far as the physical and magical are going to be having like a parity balance for what I can understand here. So it's like many of the attributes and essentially calculations between the physical and magical are going to have some sort of parity towards them depending on the job, and I am very well interested in exactly how this is going to affect some jobs, like for instance Dark Knight, as the majority of some of that job's attacks are more so in the magical spectrum. In addition to that, there's also one great change wherein all physical freaking damage dealers are no longer going to be having their combos broken when using a range attack, which I find that to be a godsend in of its own right. That pretty much keeps us from pretty much going all out in terms of greed whenever it comes to it. So like in the long run, no one has any excuses whenever they find themselves freaking dying from a point blank AoE, when you can easily just use your freaking backstep depending on what job you are, move away, use your freaking range attack, and then gap close in, and then you're good. There should be no reason why I should be seeing you on the floor. All right, all right, all right, all right. If I see you on the floor, get good, or stop playing Savage. Now, getting into the more like role aspects of the jobs, starting with the tanks, they are pretty much planning on having defensive cooldowns, actually giving you more of a benefit depending on exactly how you are using them in optimal timing. And I cannot wait to see exactly where that is going to be going to in the long run, as that is a fairly interesting change in terms of mechanical uses that the defensive cooldowns can actually truly be. I can't wait to really see where that goes. And then of course for the melees, and then by extension the actual casting range DPS, they will be having their like defensive cooldowns as far as Feint and Addle pretty much having interchangeable abilities to them, wherein Feint will now reduce both physical and magical damage dealt, but the physical aspect is going to be more so in comparison to the magical, and vice versa with the caster's Addle, wherein that one will be more so focused in magical, but it will still lower physical as well. This is an interesting change, and it's definitely going to give some form of utility to pretty much every single job, regardless of them being essentially selfish like Samurai and Black Mage. So in the long run, you have absolutely no reason to not be using this in any form of content. Dungeons, trials, Savage, ultimates, whatever. Most certainly Savage and ultimates, but it's just like you have no excuse to not be using this anywhere else. Because I could definitely say for certain, it's going to be a nice change of pace for all of the freaking melee users when it comes to defensive cooldowns. Well, more so for the tanks. And speaking of defensive cooldowns, the physical ranged defensive cooldowns as far as Troubadour, Tactician, Shield Samba will all have their cooldowns adjusted to 90 seconds from 120 seconds, which will facilitate the whole entire use of like support in terms of defensive party buffs. So that's nice. And then lastly, the ones who have the most significant amount of change being the healers, receiving such a systematic changes. The ability to just not only cast single target buffs, they also have their offensive spell cast times reduced to 1.5 seconds. Can you even imagine how holies are gonna be like now, wherein you be freaking sending out like 3 freaking holies every freaking 2 seconds? Now you're gonna be sending like 6. That's ridiculous, son. What's even more ridiculous is the fact that LB's, and by extension LB3's range has been increased to 50 yalms. It is now essentially a room-wide freaking LB3, or just LB in general. This is pretty much the greatest change in the entire flipping game systematically. No longer will anyone be excluded from being raised. It's just like, it's amazing how we're finally getting to this point. But speaking of point, it's time for us to actually get to the point of essentially the individual job changes and seeing where each of them have gone from Shadowbringers, starting with the Dragoon. Now, one of the freaking greatest things that they finally flipping did is freaking giving Disembowel to be applied on our freaking AoE combo. Thank God. That was quite possibly the dumbest thing that I just could not understand why in the world that wasn't even done from the very get-go, or even during the time of the entirety of Shadowbringers. But continuing on, another thing that was definitely changed was the gauge, as it was updated with new resources. 2 parts that are actually added into the gauge. Not only that, the gauge has also been updated to where like it no longer has the blood of the dragon, as that is now a trait. And that in and of itself is going to be very interesting in the long run when it comes to this job mechanically. I can't not only imagine how things are going to be when it comes to using this job more effectively, as you will no longer need to be concerned about keeping up your blood of the dragon throughout many of the instances. Especially when it comes to freaking spamming your wheeling and your freaking fang and claw. That is just going to be very different in terms of its rotation, and then not to mention its effectiveness. Speaking of its effectiveness, Spine Shatter Dive now has 2 charges, so that is going to open a lot of doors when it comes to gap closers and just essentially damage overall. We also get a 4-part combo in terms of our AoE rotation, which I can only imagine is going to be in a similar vein to that of like Raiden Thrust, wherein Doomstrike will most likely transform into this new ability. I can only imagine this actually being the case here because I really hope that they're not going to be giving us any more buttons when it comes to this new action for AoE rotations. Moving on to further updates, we now get a new upgrade to Chaos Thrust and Full Thrust. Chaos Thrust looking pretty much like a la Morn in some ways, to be perfectly honest. I swear I could not help but see that being a thing there. And then lastly, a new line AoE skill that activates when completing a combo twice, AoE or a single target, that just has a nice duality of both the freaking blood and the life of the dragon on how the colors just freaking like twirl as it goes through your opponent. That freaking skill just looks straight up sick. I'm just gonna say right now. And I'm fairly surprised. I can't really help but feel that with many of the things that have been added here, it really strikes me as amazed on exactly how they went about going with the changes with this job. And I can't wait to actually get a feel for what the changes are going to be like when it comes to Endwalker. But now we're going to go ahead and move on to Warrior, starting with the fact that it also has its Storm's Eye buff that will finally be applied within our AoE combo, thank God. Another thing that is very interesting is going to be the fact that Onslaught and Upheaval no longer uses the Beast Gauge, which I just can't help but find that to be just weird, and at the same time something that I've been wanting for the longest time. More so for Onslaught, because Onslaught now has 3 charges. That is something that I've pretty much been a little bit conflicted on whether or not if I wanted this change, as every other tank pretty much have their gap closers as actual charges. For Warrior who doesn't, I mean, sure, Onslaught is on a 10-second cooldown, but it's just like, it felt a little bit off having to use our resources just to freaking use the move. Now, the conflicting aspect of it is the fact that it no longer uses the Beast Gauge, meaning that it can no longer be weaved within our inner release combo, and by extension of that, doesn't have direct hit crit added onto it when you actually are in a release. That is going to be a little bit off-putting. I'm just gonna be real. I don't really know exactly how I'm gonna feel about this, and I don't really know how all of the other warriors are gonna be feeling like when it comes to this change as well. Let me know down in the comments how you guys feel about it. Getting further into the updates here, we have an updated Nascent Flash, as well as the fact that the inner release in and of itself has been updated, where we now have like only 3 Fel Cleaves that we can use, which is very interesting. They reduced the number of Fel Cleave instead of extending it, which I'm just gonna be real here. I'm fine with it, to be perfectly honest. The whole meme behind Fel Cleave has gotten pretty old, and I really just wanted Warrior to really think of something else that it can really focus on when it comes to it. And the new follow-up skill is definitely a direction that it can most certainly really capitalize on, I really have to say. Though, in the long run, I can't help but feel as though it has some kind of similarity to that of Requiescat, or essentially Paladin's freaking Confiteor combo, technically speaking, wherein you are freaking spamming Holy Spirit until you actually use Confiteor. Essentially similar here, where you're spamming Fel Cleave to go into this spinning ball of death, which I'm gonna be honest, I could not help but just get a full war from freaking Darksiders going on here with this spinning nonsense. Like, I can't be the only one that freaking drew this parallel, right? I mean, the literal character in Darksiders is named War. So, like, come on now. I can't be the only one that saw this when it came to looking at this skill. But we got to go ahead and continue on and move on to the next job. that being Red Mage, which also, quite frankly, got a good number of changes that I am fairly hyped that they finally gave this job. I swear, and it's probably going to be making me want to play it even more so now. I swear, finally, Red Mage is looking a lot more fun with the changes it received that I've just been wishing for like 4 years now. It's ridiculous. Starting off, the gauge has been updated with new resources, most likely connecting with our weapon skills that are used for spell casting. Most likely, or quite possibly, a power buff. I don't know, we'll have to wait and see. Continuing on, we have the freaking mana cost apparently being lowered, as during our combos you can essentially see how we literally start a combo at 50 to 60 mana instead of 80. That is ridiculous. Literally 50 to 60 mana and we're able to actually start an enhanced combo? That's a lot faster than I was expecting. And then not to mention the fact that they also allow displacement and engagement to both deal the same damage, which is going to be nice because that will allow you to have the choice of which skill that you want to use. That way you're not killing yourself whenever you're in a small area. That in and of itself is a change for the century. In addition to this, we also receive more support buffs, wherein we actually get a defensive party-wide buff, and I can only imagine that is definitely going to be a plus for this job when it comes to its support aspect. Though I will say that I'm kind of skipping a little bit here because technically speaking I should have been talking about modification after I was done talking about the whole mana cost, because modification no longer does a whole double deal thing depending on where your mana is. Oh no, it just gives you flat mana on both white and black. That, I just gotta be real with you, I am absolutely a-okay with that, and I appreciate the fact that we're able to freaking have that, because that allows us to easily go into our actual enhanced combo and immediately get things rolling. Like, that's one of the biggest aspects of this job that makes it so mundane, is the amount of time it takes for you to get into your freaking melee combo, do your finisher, and then rinse and repeat. This is quite frankly one of the biggest aspects of this job that I am so glad that has been changed. But that doesn't even touch anything with the change that I'm about to talk about here. Lastly speaking, the thing that I have been asking for years, 4 years, is Verflare, Vorholy, and Scorch now being AoE spells, and the fact that we can use them in our AoE rotations. Thank flippin' God. Like, oh my God. And not to mention, they freaking look amazing. Freaking Vorholy looks amazing. Scorch looks freaking badass. I can't wait to freaking see what Verflare looks like, guys. It's just freaking crazy, dude. I can't even right now. And then it even has a freaking follow-up after Scorch with a freaking Lion AoE that just looks straight up freaking rosé. Like, I just can't even with this job. I really just cannot even. The effects, even of themselves, just look amazing. It really is insane. Now, before I move on, there is the last skill that we saw when it came to the benchmark that I didn't really talk about, which is essentially an actual Thunder skill. I can only imagine this actually being a dot more so than it being an upgrade. Though, in the long run, it could actually be an upgrade to Thunder, could possibly be a Thunder 3, and we could also be getting a Arrow 3. We never really know. We have to wait until the media tour in order to check that out and get a good idea of whether or not if that is actually the case. It could be a new skill, it could be a dot, it could be anything. But for now, all we can do is just wait. So moving along, we go into Scholar, which quite frankly kinda had the saddest reveal, with it essentially having the fairy, and by extension the fairy gauge, still existing, to be perfectly honest. No changes there, absolutely none. And of course, unfortunately, the fact that nothing of note has essentially been shown when it came to Scholar, other than just a couple of new skills as far as like an upgrade Broil 4 and then of course an Art of War 2. And then lastly, obviously, the new AoE party buff that essentially increases movement speed while it's even in combat. Now, I will be perfectly honest here, this skill will most likely be fairly useful within various like savage situations. Hell, it will possibly even be useful when it comes to raid situations within like freaking 24-man raids in the long run. In those instances, I will be real here. I think that this will definitely go a long way when it comes to the Scholar's utility in some way, shape, or form. It's just that when it comes to any other forms of changes that they could have showcased, they didn't really show much, and that really puts a damper on just the hype in and of itself for the job. So I'm really hoping that when it comes to the media tour, we'll definitely get something in a way of like mechanical changes that the job can like showcase for us, and just probably go from there. I don't know, guys. And well, another thing that I will definitely say that was also disappointing right after the fact was definitely Dark Knight, as it did not really have many significant changes for the job. And no surprises here on the fact that it also did not have the Dark Aura that I wanted. Yep. That, and the fact that it also does not have a new combo finisher either. So it's just like, none of the things I asked for were even added onto the job. Like, absolutely nothing. Like, no way, shape, or form, no changes that even reflect from what I asked for in my video. So, continuing on, one of the few things that actually did change is the fact that Plunge now has a range increase of 5 yalms. So now we are able to actually like close the gap even faster, and so on and so forth. That on top of the fact that Salted Earth essentially has a new animation, and then at the same time is essentially a grounded target AoE. We no longer have to freaking point the thing at anything. Also, correction, I said grounded target AoE. It isn't a ground target AoE. We can immediately use it, and it will be placed around us as we are activating the skill, which I very much appreciated, because I'm getting sick and tired of using macros for the skill, which is what Yoshi P stated, that many of the people have been using macros for it. Even himself has been using macros for it. So it's like, it's a very nice change of pace that they have made that change, and it no longer has to be a freaking ground target. Another thing that they actually did for the actual skill is that Salted Earth actually has a new action attached to it, which is an AoE. Whenever the actual skill is down, you'll be able to deal extra damage by essentially, like, I don't know, fizzing it or something. It looks like freaking soda bubbles for some strange apparent reason. But jokes aside, surprisingly, the one thing that really baffled me when it came to the new shield skill that we saw in the benchmark is that it's actually completely separate from TBN. It doesn't replace TBN, it's literally just a whole nother single target shield. That is interesting, and I really was surprised by that. Another thing that I was surprised by was the fact that they actually reduced the time of Delirium to 60 seconds in terms of its cooldown, which is fine. That's fair. I feel like that is some form of direction that they could definitely go to, but the fact that it's still a freaking Dollar Tree version of Inner Release still hasn't changed. But one thing that has kind of changed is the fact that Esteem has a new skill that reflects the new skill that we receive, which is a line AoE that has been added into our toolkit. And for whatever reason, it seems to also be a follow-up to that of Flood of Shadow, and could also possibly be a follow-up to Edge of Shadow. I just said Flood of Shadow. Interesting. Anyway, it's a follow-up to Edge of Shadow, and by extension possibly Flood of Shadow. The only thing I'm hoping is that it will not consume any MP when it comes to this follow-up. And then speaking of Esteem, sadly, the Steam still has this timer ticking whenever it's actually summoned, and it's still going through that summoning animation, which is something I kind of wish that they could have changed in the long run, but it is what it is. And then as far as the new like abilities are concerned, like for instance, the line AoE looks sick as hell. The salted AoE looks interesting. It's definitely nice that they added something when it came to Salted Earth, so it's not just a dot that just sits there and we don't have anything else when it comes to it. It doesn't increase our gauge, it just deals damage and that's it. But at the very least, it will deal even further damage when you have it on the field, so it's very nice that it at the very least has something extra to it. The only thing, however, is the fact that mechanically, Dark Knight just doesn't seem all too different. There's just doesn't seem to be much change on Dark Knight, which is kind of sad for me, but it is what it is. I'll still be playing the job regardless, and even then, we still have the Meteor Tour, so we'll wait and see exactly what we can glean when it comes to that. Moving on to the Dancer, which quite frankly got surprising changes, to be perfectly honest. Like, I mean, it got follow-up skills after technical step, finish, and so on and so forth, improvisation, and devilment, which is something that I definitely was not expecting. Like, I mean, shit, you're literally freaking flinging a fiery peacock at your enemy. Are you serious? A flaming peacock. And then, of course, a multitude of chakrams. The effects of this job still looks beautiful to this very day. And then, lastly, apparently, effects like Flourishing Cascade now shares across both single target and AoE skills. This was something that I couldn't truly understand exactly what they mean by this. So I'm kind of hoping that any of you dancers that are out there that are watching this video, if you could please just put down in the comments exactly what you think this is supposed to mean and explain it to me in a way that makes sense, I'd very much appreciate it. But continuing on, we have Machinist next on the list, which, not surprising at all, didn't really get much in the way of changes. Other than a couple of things that were added onto it. I mean, this was to be expected. It already got its like full-on change in Shadowbringer, so of course it's just more so going to be adding things on top of that change. And for one good change, its Reassemble now has 2 charges. That in and of itself is actually pretty neat. Another thing that is neat is the fact that we got our shotgun AoE, which I feel is way more badass and most certainly better than that of Spread Shot, so that is definitely more appreciative. And then, for some strange apparent reason, we just got a flippin' chainsaw. Like, they literally just flippin' gave us a buzzsaw chainsaw freaking skill that just freaking shoots out saws at our enemies. That, or they really could have just given us our Aethromatic Auger. I swear, it's not an Aethromatic Auger, but maybe level 8 100 will finally get it. Now, as far as the chainsaw is concerned, I can only get a feel that this is most likely a similar skill to that of Drill and Air Anchor, where it is essentially separated within the GCD. I can only imagine that being the case. Mostly considered the fact that Reassemble works on it, so it's most certainly a weapon skill when it comes to it. That's the only thing that we can glean from this. But besides all of that, there's also the fact that Automaton Queen has a new final action before it disappears. And then, of course, overall, that's pretty much about it. It's saddening to say that we didn't get an Automaton King for AoE purposes, but maybe next time, maybe next expansion, you never really know. But besides that, moving on to the Gunbreaker, again, another job, literally 3 jobs that were essentially like introduced in Shadowbringers that obviously would not be getting many changes back to back on together. Is kind of surprising how that works out, you know. Anyway, one thing that is a little bit interesting, however, is the fact that some of the things that they added mechanically left me a bit surprised. Like, for instance, the fact that the job now has 3 cartridges instead of 2, which I'm just going to be really honest, I really really feel like that should have been a thing from the very get-go. But regardless, at the very least, we have it now. Another surprising thing that I honestly did not think about at the time when it came to my videos for the job action changes is the fact that they could have consolidated Gnashing Fang. I am amazed that I didn't say anything about that. And the fact that they did it is nice in its own right. I'm actually surprised that they really actually did that. And it's going to go a long way when it comes to the button bloat, or at the very least reducing it. It's definitely a welcome change, I'll most definitely say. And speaking of which, when it comes to the whole continuation aspect with Gnashing Fang, it seems as though Burst Strike is also going to be getting its own form of continuation combo, wherein it will be having maybe 2 follow-ups. The one follow-up, which is an Upward Strike, and the second one possibly being a part of this combo, where it is essentially the X marks the spot skill. Very interesting changes nonetheless. And then of course Heart of Stone also getting an upgrade in and of itself, which is looking pretty nice. I actually like the animation when it comes to this, although it is really funny when it comes to the whole shooting your freaking partner with a shield just to apply it, I will have to say. But regardless, freaking Gunbreaker is looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good for what it is worth. I definitely have no complaints here. Now, as far as complaints are concerned, I don't know exactly whether or not if I have too little or too much when it comes to Bard. Mainly due to the fact that, unfortunately, Bard still has a soul voice gauge, and by extension of that, Apex Arrow. I don't really know how to feel about this, guys, as I was kind of hoping that that could definitely be changed and most definitely removed, as I'm not really a fan of a gauge just having one thing attached to it. It really isn't the greatest concept. But besides that, one thing that did get changed is the fact that the soul gauge has been updated with 3 nodes that corresponds with Mage's Ballad, Wanderer's Minuet, as well as Army's Paean. All of these songs, as well, have also been extended to 45 seconds from 30 seconds. I was not expecting that, to be perfectly honest. Literally. And apparently, Wanderer's Minuet and Battle Voice have been adjusted to match 120 seconds, with that window being a lot more open-ended. And I find that to be very peculiar. It kind of makes me wonder whether or not if these songs will finally affect us in the long run, but they didn't really delve into that too deeply. I really hope that when it comes to the media tour that we will be able to get a confirmation on that, well, finally. And then moving on, we have a new AoE that may or may not be under the effect of Army's Paean that was added, the same AoE attack that we saw when it came to the benchmark. And then, of course, a new ability that has been added wherein each song adds a party-wide enhancement to pretty much everyone around you. Still not sure whether or not if it's going to do anything for yourself, which I only hope that they will, but I can't really tell whether or not if this is dependent on what song that you're currently on after you've fulfilled each node on the gauge. For instance, the very aura that's circling around Bard is Army's Paean, because of the fact that at the time, before that you actually completed all 3 of the nodes, was actually Army's Paean was active at the time when the skill activated. So with this in mind, I can only imagine that being the case when it comes to how the skill is going to work. And then last but not least, there's the fact that Apex Arrow now has a follow-up line AoE attack that honestly looks pretty sick. I will be honest. That is a very sick looking skill. It really is. Very sick indeed. Still, there just hasn't been many in the way of huge changes when it comes to this job. And I will honestly have to wait until freaking media tour to really get a good idea of exactly what's happening here. Will admit though, the song aura definitely looks nice. I really do not mind when it comes to having auras. Auras all day. Auras all day. You give me an aura, I'll be happy. Another thing that I'm actually happy about is the fact that Astrologian and his changes is looking to be going in the right direction. It is definitely going in the direction of the Diurnal Sect, even though all of the sects have been removed, Diurnal Sect included, like it's no longer an actual stance. It's just literally a part of the toolkit. And really, when it came to it, I was really anticipating exactly what changes that they were going to be doing when it came to this job. And lo and behold, literally all it did was just freaking adding new adjustments, or as far as new additions to its spells and its skills. Like for instance, the fact that the card system has been changed ever so slightly to the Days of Stormblood, wherein Minor Arcana now has Lord of Crowns dealing AoE damage and Lady of Crowns dealing AoE damage. This was something that I asked in my video, which I am so thankful for. Oh, it feels so good to freaking see that shit happen. Oh man, I am so happy that they actually did that. That is a very nice change. Another change that they did was to Divination, which I am not 100% sure exactly how it works, but it seems like they made it a self-applied buff, depending on the actual like seals that is used for the new enhancement and so on and so forth. I am not 100% sure in terms of how this skill is supposed to work, but we'll definitely see when it comes to later on in the future. One other change that kind of baffled me was the fact that draw no longer has charges. That's going to be interesting. We're just pretty much back to the single draw technique and having a cooldown and so on and so forth. Yeah, that's peculiar, but I guess that is to facilitate the fact that Divination has like some kind of unique change to itself, so I can only imagine that that is most likely the reason. Getting on to the changes of its spells, unfortunately Combust doesn't exactly have a new skill, but Malefic has a lovely new animation. I really enjoyed this version of Malefic. It's quite possibly the best version out of them all, to be perfectly honest. And then of course Gravity having a friggin' new animation. Now I literally just cannot get over exactly how freaking amazing the new Gravity animation is. The best Gravity. It gives me freaking Dissidia vibes just looking at this Gravity animation. I am so in love with this Gravity. Ooh, it is so good. So good. Another thing that is definitely going to be very good is the fact that Astrologian essentially has a freaking Assize variant on its toolkit with that freaking Star Shower move, literally dealing damage and healing at the same time. I can only imagine it will most likely freaking restore MP, whether or not if that will be removed. But if it does, if it's not, we don't know. All I know is that the fact that they actually gave Astrologian a variant of White Mage as a size, and it looking freaking so absolutely stunning. I swear, this job is looking really nice. Everything about this is looking nice so far, and with it being a pure healer, I'm most likely going to be going back to playing Astrologian a lot more like I did back in Heavensward. And speaking of jobs that I'm possibly going to be playing a lot more when it comes to it, Samurai and the way of its changes, I'm really going to have to say that I, as a Samurai main, is a little bit ashamed of myself on how I was not able to pick a majority of some of the mechanical changes that Sam has this second time around. Yeah, it really baffles me how I kind of missed some of the crucial changes that should have stuck out to me when it came to it. Like for instance, the fact that Mekkyo Shisui and Tsubai Gaishi now have 2 charges, meaning essentially they have pretty much snuck in the fact that we are now able to do 4 Midari Setsugekas, my friends. Many of us, excluding myself, pretty much thinking that we would be getting 3, BD3 just went even further beyond that and gave us 4. Yeah, I see what you're doing there, BD3. I see what you're doing. But besides that, getting onto the changes that I was able to pick out on is the fact that Yukikaze now has an AoE that completes our Sen AoE combos, which is very nice. And then not to mention the fact that our AoE combos now finally apply Jinpu and Shifu. So thankfully, we will no longer have to be doing single target attacks in order to get our buffs. Thank God. And now getting back to the whole Tsubame Gaishi aspect, Tsubame Gaishi now pretty much no longer counts towards the Shoha gauge. Like, you will no longer be getting anything in terms of resources on that gauge, and I can only find that to be facilitating the fact on how we now have charges when it comes to Tsubame Gaishi as well as Mikio Shisui, which is appropriate, I guess, when it comes to it. One thing that is definitely appropriate is the fact that Third Eye now grants 10 Kinki, which will most certainly go a long way when it comes to the freaking Sam. It kind of baffled me a little bit on how when they used Third Eye, they made it seem as though we would pretty much be able to use Isatsu Sene, and that kind of confusion got me a little bit, but realistically it was mainly because of the fact that it gained 10 and automatically got 50, so it was able to use that skill. But last but not least on the Sam changes or additions, to be perfectly honest, is the fact that Sam has received a new Aijutsu finally, with this godly animation of an attack that finally adds impact to this job. The one thing that I've been looking forward to for Samurai is to get skills that actually showcases just how powerful it is supposed to be. And the very animation of its core with the freaking Kenki, the literal ki that's literally flowing out of your body, and the freaking 2 slashes that looks as though it's a combination of Tenka Goken and freaking Midari Setsugeka, just literally freaking shaking your screen, and just like, it's so freaking quick and powerful. I swear it is such an amazing looking skill. And honestly, what stuck out to me is the fact that this is essentially an AoE Aijutsu. I don't know whether or not if any of you noticed, but it seems as though that if you were to look a little bit closer, it seems to be more so of a Super Tenka Goken than a Super Midare, as when you look under the slashes, it has the Tenka Goken effect under it. That's the one thing that kind of stuck out to me. So this is an AoE attack that looks freaking potent as hell. I so can't wait to freaking try this job out. I am most likely not going to be dropping Samurai in the next expansion like I thought I would, but realistically speaking, I was never really planning on dropping it. I'm just saying that I was probably not going to be playing it too much due to the fact that I got Reaper, but it's looking like I'm probably going to be playing it more due to these mechanical changes. Just a tad. Continuing on to the White Mage, I can fairly say that White Mage is looking to be having some interesting new abilities in its repertoire. Well, some of them. I mean, there's of course the Glare upgrade that we were obviously going to be getting. Beautiful as all get out. Beautiful, beautiful. One interesting change though that I will definitely have to say is the fact that Divine Benison now has 2 charges. Wasn't expecting that. And one other thing I wasn't expecting is the fact that it now has a new field restorative ability that pretty much works in a similar vein to that of Astrologian's Earthly Star. However, it pulses a potent heal over the course of the time that it's out on the field, then it just building up in the same way of like Earthly Star. And I can only imagine that it is likely going to increase the heal potency within each pulse. This, I cannot wait to freaking actually deep dive in exactly what this skill really truly is, because this freaking thing is beautiful as hell. And then not to mention another beautiful thing is the new tier of holy that we get. A freaking flower holy? Are you serious? That is just oof. That is oof. And to be perfectly honest, another form of oof that's kind of in the more bad spectrum is the fact that Fluid Order is no longer in the game. Damn. And I'm just gonna say right now, it's not gonna be missed. And now we have moved on to the ninja, wherein its actions, to be perfectly honest, one of the things that I have been so hyped about is the fact that it is finally going to be focusing more on adding the effects of their mudras onto their attacks, which, thank God, this is exactly what I've been looking forward to more so than anything when it comes to this job. But to get onto something that's a little bit more like particular when it comes to the job in essence is the fact that Shadowfang has effectively been removed. So there's no longer any dots that we have to be managing on this job. And I really gotta say, feels like it was just about time for it to leave. So bye-bye Shadowfang. And hello, new mudra skills. Like for instance, a freaking Huton weapon skill. Not entirely sure whether or not if it's truly a weapon skill or a combo right now, mainly due to the fact that you can't really see the effect under the character's feet when it's used. I will say, however, that I enjoy the pleasure that we have a new skill that actually activates our Huton buff and is essentially an attack. Now, the one thing that I'm not too sure of is whether or not if it's going to also refresh the Huton buff, which is also something that I wonder about when it comes to the various other skills like Armor Crush, as it also still refreshes the Huton buff. Capitalizing again on the whole additional effects to that of our actual mudra skills, for whatever reason, it seems like our Hake Mujin Satsu combo kind of affects a Duton in some way. I can't really tell, but for some strange apparent reason, it seems as though our Doton has like some kind of additional animations to it whenever we're actually using this combo. And now continuing on with some of the new skills that we also get, like for instance, the benchmark skill that we saw and actually fully saw now is our new Bushin clone cooldown, which is now confirmed to be a range attack that also uses a Huton skill and effectively refreshes our buff when used. Another thing to add on top of that is the fact that it's actually an AoE, which I was not expecting. So we effectively have a range attack AoE on a ninja. Go figure. And then last but not least, in true Naruto fashion, we get a Raiton gap closer along with a freaking full-on Raiton attack Chidori style. Full-on Chidori freaking lightning blade, purple lightning type nonsense, and I'm just gonna say right now I absolutely love it. I can just see myself playing the ninja more now, as it just really looks like a ninja where it focuses more on its mudras and the effects therein onto its attacks. That is just something that I've been wishing for so long to see when it comes to this job, and we are finally getting it. And another thing that we're finally getting is some interesting changes when it comes to Black Mage. I'm gonna really say right now, I'm actually quite surprised on how many mechanical changes that this job has gotten so far without it entirely changing its actual focus and its rotation. It still is such a stable job. It really is interesting to me how they were able to do this, because one thing that I definitely can't wait to experiment with is its overall rotation now, as there have been some stark changes to some of the new things that they've been given. And that, to start off, is the fact that Enochian is now a trait just like Grease Lightning and Blood of the Dragon, and will activate whenever you're under freaking Astral Fire and Umbral Ice. And this is only just gonna freaking keep things more streamlined when it comes to focusing on the job's other mechanical abilities. And speaking of which, the thing got a freaking new resource applied onto its gauge. Essentially some kind of freaking fire and ice spell, which this fire and ice spell can refresh your stacks. Like, do you even understand exactly how interesting that's going to be making our rotation? Like, it effectively replaces Fire 1 in the late game, wherein we would have to freaking use Fire 1 in the middle of our freaking Fire 4 spams. No longer will we have to do that now. Oh no. And I'm just gonna be perfectly honest, I'm just loving the absolute effects when it comes to casting this ability. Like literally having the elemental circles around you as you cast and just let off that freaking gigantic ass explosion with ice covering around it. It's just so freaking amazing. And then the way on how you're even able to obtain the spell is a very interesting way in and of itself. And one that I really did not even think about. It's actually ingenious on how they came up with it. The fact that transitioning between Astral Fire and Umbral Ice gives you this actual buff and allows you to use it is quite interesting. The most unique way of obtaining a resource when it comes to using our new abilities. I am seriously amazed that I just did not think this up myself. I really am. I really am. And then last but not least is the fact that we are finally guys, we are finally getting upgrades to our Fire 2 and our Blizzard 2 with new Blizzard and Fire 5 AoE spells. Not to mention the fact that they will also be refreshing our stacks as well. The AoEs are going to be insane on Black Mage in late game. Oh my god, I am so freaking loving the direction that they're taking with Black Mages here. It just baffles me how they were literally able to keep a majority of the Black Mage's kit the same while it's still invigorating a rotation with new spells. It baffles me how they still do this shit. Bro, freaking Black Mage just still stays the same, but yet is different each and every expansion. It amazes me to no end. But what amazes me even more is these final freaking jobs that freaking showcase their abilities in the last few moments of this job action trailer. This is where we get the heavy hitters. This is essentially freaking BD3 saying that, oh yeah, this lineup right here, yeah, this lineup is where everything like hits the fan. I'm just gonna let you know right now. Freaking BD3 did this on purpose. Like they literally knew what they were doing. And I'm just gonna say right now, when it came to the music, that shit was bumping. Like, can we even talk about that music, that song? Like, am I the only one that thought that when it came to that song, I was like listening to some freaking Kingdom Hearts shit? That thing was going crazy. Was I hearing things? I had to be hearing things. But continuing on and moving on to the first job in the lineup, Sage. The one healer that is essentially going to make me heal way more than I have ever healed in the entirety of my 7 years playing Final Fantasy XIV. This primary barrier healer, which is going to be focusing purely on that aspect, just has so many things going for it that just like suits me to a T. The fact that it has a freaking dance partner ability that allows you to heal the target party member that you have attached to it while it's dealing damage simultaneously. Like, that is fucking ridiculous. The fact that they even thought that up and is now made a reality is like something that I just cannot believe is actually in this game, and I am so thankful for the fact that it is, because that is something that just it really goes up my alley. And then not to mention the fact that when it came to some of the abilities that it showed off, as well as this gauge, I really got to say that there was quite a good number of similarities in terms of the skills and gauges that the job possessed that was kind of like White Mage and Scholar in some ways. Like, for instance, on how the gauge feels over time, just like White Mage's Lilies, and the fact that, well, the 3 gauges above that seem similar to that of Aetherflow stacks, wherein you can actually use one of them in order to have a skill that essentially is pretty much similar to that of Scholar's Lustrate. Let's be real here. And then, of course, when it comes to like another part of the gauge where you accumulate at the very bottom is how, like, when you use certain shields and it breaks, it will essentially gain a DPS skill that you can unleash afterwards. And that was something that I was asking for. A freaking gauge that literally just not only uses your like healing abilities, but also capitalizes on DPS abilities. This is what I've been asking for so much. This is how this is supposed to work. This is how gauges are supposed to work. It is amazing. Thank you. This is what I asked for, and I got it, and it's amazing, guys. Oh my god. And then speaking of its actual abilities when it comes to it, like its DPS skills, like the augmented like abilities that this job possess, wherein it changes any of the skills, spells, or anything, it doesn't even matter. It will make it instant cast. And then not to mention, it will even change up many of the freaking offensive skills that you have. Like for instance, when you augment it, you will actually have a dot. That's how you get your dot, is that you augment your offensive spell. And that is pretty much how that works. Not to mention the fact that it has many other DPS skills that I really wasn't even expecting. The fact that it literally has a cannon, a flippin' cannon, line AoE that deals damage and heals at the same time. It's sure enough, it may have a bit of a charge and seems as though it may be part of like the GCD, just essentially separate, similar to that of like drill on Machinist. It's still just flipping crazy on how this job just like suits me so much, because it's just like, not only does it have that, guys, it has a fucking gap closer. It has a gap closer. It uses its new lives as wings in order to fly as a gap closer. Not even freaking white mages has that. You can't be seeing white mages using its freaking wings to move anywhere. Freaking Sage is like, fuck that. I'm gonna use my new lives to freaking fly whatever the hell I want. Oh my god. And then to make things even more apparent, they freaking looked at like Scholar and it was like, okay, that's a nice art of war, but how do you like freaking laser beam rain and freaking whatever the hell that AoE cooldown that they showed off was at the very end? I have no idea. All I do know is that it has 2 charges and it looks freaking amazing. I just can't even with this job. I just can't even with this job. Everything about this job is pretty much what I've always wanted in a healer. Its play style is everything that I've wanted for a healer. The sounds, the effects, everything about this job just fits me to a capital fucking T, with the same being said for my boy Ezekiel. I, for the life of me, just cannot wait to play this job. I really can't. I'm gonna be, and you know, the one baffling thing about it is that the job being something that is actually gonna make me want to do healing in Savage content, that just tells you just how much of a hype ass job this is, because I would not be doing healing in Savage content. It just would not happen. But continuing on, we have the final few jobs left, with Monk pretty much getting substantial changes since the time of its rework in Shadowbringers. And I really gotta say, some of these changes, these substantial changes, I definitely agree with, and at the same time, not so much on the others. Like for instance, I can definitely say for one thing that in the direction that they're going, it's definitely nice changes that we're seeing here. Like for instance, chakras now being unlocked at lower levels. This is actually a godsend of a change, and will actually make things a lot interesting when it comes to the lower levels. It actually makes me wonder exactly how they will go about doing that when it comes to some of the like abilities that we can use. I can only wonder whether or not if we'll be able to use Enlightenment when it comes to that. We'll just have to wait and see. And then not to mention the fact that upon the actual chakra gauge, we now have a new gauge that focuses on the duality of shadow and light chakras, which is something that I flippin' asked in my video, and I am so freaking ecstatic. I am so happy they actually added that in. We are finally capitalizing on the aspect of this job's job quest continuity. The fact that we freaking mastered both light and shadow of the chakras, and it actually being within gameplay. That is all that I asked. Thank you. And then going off of that is the fact that we now have a skill that reflects this change with this gauge, as it essentially like works with the change in perfect balance and the new action that we get connected to it, known as Masterful Blitz. And I'm just gonna have to say for right now, like, Masterful Blitz is essentially like Ninja's Mudra system, but it's more so applied by weapon skills, depending on exactly what moves that you use under perfect balance at the time of activation. Like, for instance, you can actually go about getting Elixir Field whenever, depending on what skills that you're actually using that you come up with, you'll be able to use said skill. Now, I'm just gonna point out right now, I don't really know how to feel about the fact of Elixir Field being part of this, and it makes me wonder exactly what other skills that will also be a part of this, whether or not if Tornado Kick will, because I did not technically see Tornado Kick within the toolkit of Monk when it was showcased in a demonstration. So that kind of makes me wonder whether or not if it was either removed or if it was moved to Masterful Blitz. Also, side note, I really gotta say on how they essentially just made like multiple references on this job. Like, for one, the fact of Masterful Blitz essentially just being Blitz, but with a different name that comes from freaking Final Fantasy VI and is essentially Sabin. That's freaking amazing as hell. But you want to know what's even more amazing is the fact that one of the Masterful Blitz that you actually unleash is literally freaking Star Shower from Final Fantasy VII Remake from freaking Tifa. We're literally having a Final Blitz move that freaking looks like Tifa. But not only that, we're also getting Dragon Ball Z aspects with a new dash that replaces shoulder tackle that freaking also not only dashes to freaking enemies but our allies. Like, what the fuck is happening here? Is with this job? It's the fact that it looks so freaking fun now. I can't even believe this shit. It looks so fucking interesting, dude. I can't even with this right now. I really can't. And then some of the other changes that I did not talk about, which is the fact of some of the removal aspects of the job, like how shoulder tackle actually got removed for this dash that I was talking about. And then not to mention the fact that True Strike and Twin Snakes no longer have positionals. So yeah, we now got a new dash that effectively works like ethereal manipulation, which can be used on both enemy and allies. A very unique freaking gap closer, especially for the job's theme and essence, I must say. Everything about like the changes for Monk is just looking so much more fun than it realistically was way back when, and even now. And honestly, I just can't wait to learn more and to also try it out when it comes out. I really just can't. And another thing that I really cannot wait to try out, and what is quite possibly the greatest in terms of changes when it comes to all of the jobs in the game, excluding the new jobs, Summoner has effectively become the third new job of Endwalker. Like, no joke. Not only that, but it is finally an actual summoner. It really is a freaking summoner. All due to the fact of its gauge getting updated with new resources, and I will be getting to that soon enough. Oh, trust and believe. But first off, we need to talk about the fact of many of its new additions and removals. Like, for instance, the fact that it no longer focuses on dot management, as Bio and Miasma, and by extension Tri-Disaster, have been removed. That is amazing. I no longer have to freaking focus on that. I am happy about that. It is amazing that I don't have to think about that. Thank God it's over. It's over, guys. It's over. And then not to mention the fact that some of the new additions that we get when it comes to many of the removing of this is that Fester will most likely be a flat damage single target cooldown now than just it being anything that has to do with the dots. And that in its own right is pretty much nice when it comes to it. And now, talking about other additions, the fact that the Carbuncle / Eggy will now be giving some form of utility buff as far as some shields for what you can glean from the job actions trailer. And then not to mention some other things that were removed, or more so moved, was Dreadborn Trance, actually being relegated under Summon Bahamut, and now even affects our Ruin 3 and our Outburst spells like Summoning Phoenix. Not to mention the fact that Death Flare can also be used when Bahamut is summoned. That is freaking ridiculous. And the fact that we also see skills that's literally in the reflection of Bahamut from our Ruin 3 and our Outburst just looks absolutely flipping amazing, dude. It just looks amazing. Oh my god. But one thing that I can't really say whether or not if it is amazing is the fact that both Bahamut and Phoenix are now 15 seconds instead of 20 seconds in terms of how long that they can actually stay out. I don't know exactly how to feel about that, but I can only guess that the reason why they did that is because of one number that, that we're going to be talking about soon enough. But continuing on about Bahamut and Phoenix is the fact that Phoenix apparently has its Everlasting Flight be a manual cooldown than it just automatically activating on summoning. And as interesting as that is, I don't really know whether or not if that's really a good thing or a bad thing. It's probably a good thing because at the very least you'll be able to control it, but I don't really know how pet ghosting is going to work when it comes to that. But one thing that is not going to be pet ghosting is the fact that both Bahamut and Phoenix no longer freaking move when you are moving. Meaning that they will finally just attack as you are attacking whilst you move. It was so annoying when it came to that because you weren't able to get the full amount of damage every single time that you needed to take a few steps to avoid AoEs. It's such an amazing freaking feeling to freaking see that. It's so good. It is so good. And the same be said for the new Outburst animation that we get. I swear I'm going to be spamming the ever-living shit out of that. But then we get to the last aspect of this job. The fact that we are finally a summoner that summons full-on, life-size forms of Garuda, Titan, and Ifrit. Each unleashing their ultimate attacks of Aerial Blast, Earth and Fury, and freaking Hellfire. Oh my god. While it's also gaining their elemental properties of each of the summons for a short period of time. Like, I just couldn't help but find myself still mind blown from that shit. No matter how many times I witness it. Oh my god, it's just so freaking insane. I swear, it is just so freaking insane the way on how we cycle through these beasts. It is ridiculous. And I just really can't wait to play it. It actually makes me want to play it more than Black Mage, and that's insane. Blasphemy, I know. But it's just like this job. It easily wins in the changes department when it comes to the job action updates. It really does. But one job that absolutely wins my heart, like utterly wins my heart, goes to the one, the only Reaper. I swear. Reaper absolutely stole my heart. Every single thing from the sound effects to the very effects and even the animations itself screamed everything I've ever wanted for this job. The initial introduction as it twirls its scythe to then charge his buff just left me wet with how smooth that damn animation was. Oh my god! I swear if I was a freaking woman, I'd be, oh my god, just looking at that animation, I'd be left wet. Jesus Christ! Like, that is just how you start off a new job right there. I am sorry. Like, dude, that just went so hard, I swear. Every single thing about that was amazing. Reaper just has everything. The whole kit and caboodle. And honestly, if I wanted, I could easily talk about this job for hours on what we have seen in just the action trailer and the demonstration alone. but it's like I can't for right now. We're already at a freaking hour in this video, so it's like all I can do is just gush and just like the short time frame that I have left. We only have one more job, so we just need to go ahead and continue talking about it. But it's just like I just can't help but gush about this. Every single effect from its range attacks that, albeit have a bit of a cast time to them, but it's just like, it doesn't really matter. It just looks absolutely sick. Along with its freaking void teleport that leaves a flippin' portal behind. Like, are you serious? Besides Monk, that is like easily the most clean teleport gap closer in the game. Oh my god. And then from what we learn about how Reaper's playstyle is, it just fits me to a freaking capital T, I swear. With this blend of complexity and interesting mechanics that just makes it stand on its own. I swear, it's quite frankly the most intricate melee job when it comes to his toolkit. One thing that just literally caught me off guard was the fact that it actually isn't a pure melee like I wanted it to be in my actual video. It really isn't a pure melee like Samurai. It actually has synergy to it. Two, to be in fact. That in and of itself baffles me. One that boosts the nearby party members' damage while gaining resources for yourself, effectively working like Brotherhood or freaking dance partner with technical step. And then, of course, the freaking other working in a similar fashion to that of like Dark Knight's TBN and Samurai's Third Eye. Wherein if the shield breaks, it grants those around you a regen effect. For what? Like, that is just incredibly mind-blowing to see on a job such as this. But it's like I'm all fucking for it, dude. I'm fucking all for it, man. I can't even right now. And it's like, in addition to this, the job's damage, it just seems like the job's damage is gonna be equal to that of the monk. Oh my god. I'm just gonna be honest with you, I really can't complain on that whatsoever. Like, that is just absolutely fine. It is completely absurd, but it's like, it's absolutely fine to me. As long as it looks badass, I just will not care about the damage anymore. And it's like, as long as it feels good, I really won't care about the damage. It just doesn't matter to me anymore. Every single thing about this job just like freaking, it's amazing with its animations and the fact that it just feels so good looking at this job with its effects. It quite literally beats Dark Knight in terms of animation. I'm sorry. Like, Dark Knight, Reaper just has taken your throne in my heart. It really has. I mean, shit. Even his gauge look absolutely amazing, and I most certainly will not be freaking using simple mode for it. You can best believe that shit. Like, I can't even be, like, joking with you on that nonsense. Like, that is an insane looking freaking gauge, man. Both of them. And the fact that with many of the other things that we saw, like for instance, the avatar cooldowns just looking absolutely flippin' badass. The side skills just freaking puts me over the flippin' moon looking at them. The way the freaking Reaper twirls his scythe around whenever he uses the AoE. Oh my god, that raises the freaking avatar gauge. Oh, dude. And then of course, like last but not least, oh dude, the avatar possession. Oh, it's everything. It's that I am so fucking happy to see that it actually does combos. And just like even further than that, even though it has a reduced cast time of 1.5 seconds. The form is fast as hell. And the animations, just perfection. Just absolute perfection. Oh my god. The way on how the first scythe attack just like swoops to the side to slice horizontally, and then just has another one that just like freaking does it twice, finishing with a downward slice, and like you even go so far as to use the Avatar's claws. Ah, I can't even with this job. Make it more mess. They gave the job an epic dark ball finisher that ends with like 3 scythe-shaped blades that looks as if it's like the Avatar's claws sticking out. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched this portion of the job action trailer. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen it. All I can say is that it's most likely an unhealthy amount, I swear. I can't wait to play this game, man. I can't wait to play this game. I want to play Reaper, man. I want to play Reaper. I just want to play Reaper now, man. I really want to play. Oh my god. Oh my god. Gush, I really gotta stop gushing. I need to get on to Paladin now. I need to get on to the freaking poster boy. Which honestly freaking got like interesting additions to his kit, even albeit minor in some ways when it comes to his changes. But it's just like, I really gotta say though, I'm not entirely sure whether or not if some of the changes that we've seen is going to be enough for me to be all too hyped for it. Sure, it was cool when it came to seeing the confiteor combos, but it's like I really want to learn a little bit more on what has been changed mechanically when it comes to this job. Like, for instance, the fact that, similar to that of Dark Knight's Plunge, Intervene actually gets a 5 yalm increase. So it's just like we'll be able to get in a lot faster and a lot sooner. Another change would be the addition of Spirits Within getting an upgrade, which I will be honest, the animation to that looks fairly sick. And then of course there's the upgradable Sheltron, which was shown off. I swear I never get tired of that animation. It's actually quite the best shield animation I have ever seen. And then there's the fact that Requiescat now got changed to where it just deals potent damage regardless of the amount of MP that you have. It doesn't change. The effectiveness of the skill is now more apparent. So now you don't have to worry about exactly where in the world your MP is when it comes to this. And then of course, harkening back to the whole Confiteor combo, the fact that now it's going to be having a full-on 3 attack combo featuring even more swords, like more and more swords, literally unlimited blade works up in this bitch. I just find it very, very interesting. I really gotta say, they really went ham. And it looks a lot fun when it comes to that combo. I just really feel as though they could have given us a little bit more of an idea of exactly what the job is going to be able to do whenever it comes to its defensiveness. But in the long run, I guess I'll just have to wait until the media tour to really get a good idea on that. So for the time being, I will just hold my judgment on this job for the time that we have left. And so now we have finally finished with all of my thoughts and opinions of the jobs and their individual changes. Some not all too much when it comes to their changes. Others quite a lot when it comes to their changes. And to be perfectly honest, I think I'm going to be having a video just ranking the changes that we have seen so far until the time that the media tour happens. And then I'll most likely update the rankings when it comes to it, just off of what we learn when it comes to the media tour content. But for now, that's pretty much everything that I have for you guys. I only have a couple of other things left that I have planned when it comes to my videos. I apologize for the lateness when it comes to this one. Still having a little bit of some stuff when it comes to working, well, a lot, essentially. It's a lot ever since the time I even moved, but regardless, I will be trying my best in order to keep up when it comes to uploading some new content for you guys and going from there. With that in mind, I hope you guys have a very nice day, nice night, nice morning, nice afternoon, all that good nonsense, and I shall catch you in the next one. Deuces. Peace out.